Morning, everybody. I am super excited to welcome Tim Conkle, founder and CEO of MSP20. Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Sugata. I'm humbled to be here. I'm glad you had me in. I'm excited to see kind of where we go today.
Well, I've been watching your amazing journey and an organization that you've been building. Both of us have been in the channel or in the IT space for roughly about 3 decades. We've seen a little bit of the evolution and the change and the excitement. So, what I'm hoping to do today is to kind of really learn from you from our customer base, prospect base, which are predominantly in tech and manufacturing, kind of looking back, some of the things that we can reflect on, kind of reflecting on where we are now and where things are going.
Yeah.
So before we get going, maybe you can take a minute and introduce yourself and your organization, and then we'll start kind of deep diving into trends and everything else.
So Tim Conkle, I've been in this industry since 1992. So been around a while. I was in the military before that. Then I got out of the military and worked for Ross Perot's company EDS for about 4 years, and then bought a little company called Roland Technology, and a lot of evolution has happened from there, and so it's been a really cool journey, all the way up to the 20. And simply the 20 is just a large group of MSPs that decided to do it better. And how do you do it better? You do it together. And so we all standardized and went one direction.
So what was the beginning of it? How did you sort of just come up with the notion of MSP20? Like,
So this is the crazy thing. I for probably the first 18 years of evolution of my company, speaking of Roland Technology, I struggled like every other MSP to grow. Why? Well, the phone didn't ring. I mean, Tim was great at selling. I could sell if I could get in front of people, but marketing is always seems to be the Achilles heel. And so at the 18th year, I figured out one oil well that really worked well, and it took me about 5 years to refine it. And that's basically Google Pay Per Click. It's been a really, really good oil well for us. Obviously, we've added a lot more since then, but it kind of it kind of changed the whole dynamic of everything. And all of a sudden, my company started growing really, really fast. Well, the industry watched and saw that, and they said, "Hey, Tim, can you teach us how to do that?" And so I've taught hundreds of MSPs in the beginning how to grow their company. I would forklift my campaigns into theirs, and then we would do all the changes for their market. They'd turn it on, and all of a sudden, in the class, people's phones would ring. They'd get meetings before they leave, and it mesmerized everybody. And that was cool because I made a lot of money doing that. But it created two other problems. First problem it created was, yes, I could get a guy leads, but I had a guy in Florida that came up to me at a conference, and I asked him how the Google was working for me. He says, "Man, I've been on like 40 appointments." And I said, "You're knocking it out of the park." And he goes, "But I haven't sold any." So I knew I could make their phone ring, but if they couldn't sell, it didn't matter. And then I was in California speaking at a conference, and a guy walks up to me, and I recognized him, and I said, "Hey, how's everything been working since you went to the class?" And he said, "Oh man, we've knocked it out of the park." And I think he took his company from like 700,000 to 3.5 million in 18 months, which is unheard of for an average everyday MSP. And I said, "That's a knockout of the park. It's incredible." He goes, "Yeah, but we're not making any more money." And I'm like, "What?" And so I went to his office and I opened the door, or I didn't open the door. He opened the door and I walked in behind him, and there's all these people in there. And I'm like, "Who are all these people?" And he goes, "Oh, I had to hire all these people to provide service." And then up on the wall, I noticed he outsourced help desk as well. And I'm like, "Oh my God." And so that was the other problem, scale. And I came up with a three-legged stool and the basic premise idea for the 20 after that visit. And that was, MSPs really need to learn three things: lead gen, got to make your phone ring; sales; and scale, nothing else. That should be their mantra. Everything else is already done in life. All the tools are out there that we need. All the knowledge out there to provide great service, and all that's there. But the basic fundamental building blocks of the business was not there. And so I created the 20 on a whiteboard 13 years ago based on that experience, and shoot really, really way forward. Uh, Sometimes luck is a really cool thing, you know. But people always tell me this all the time. There's no such thing as luck. There's only things that propel you towards things that look like luck. You know, you never find somebody that sits at home that knocks it out of the park. Was luck involved? No, it has nothing to do with luck. But that same person, if you'd have got out and knocked it out of the park, it's, wow, you were lucky. No, you got up and moved. And so we created the 20 to get people to move. And then we gave them the execution pieces of it as well. And so that's kind of where it all came full circle. Now there's a lot of in-depth stuff that you can go into in that, and we can do that whenever.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. But let's go back to the name MSP 20. What does it mean?
So it's based off the 80-20 rule, Pareto's rule, where the 20 percenters. You know, if you can ever get the 20 percenters together, and I preach this pretty much everywhere I go, we're better together. You know, biblical principle: a house divided against itself will surely fall. An industry divided against itself, outsiders can come in and they can fleece the flock and do all the other things that go with it. If the MSP, I wrote a LinkedIn article the other day about if MSPs really knew the gold mine they were sitting on, they would learn how to mine. Instead, they let other people mine all of this gold that's sitting in this industry, and it's nuts, but it's kind of the way life works.
So let's go back a little bit, Tim, maybe discovery of gold. Like if you think about a couple of decades ago, the channel was all break fix,
Yeah,
right? You sell some hardware, if you're a gold, you make 30 points, you get some back end rebates, and things were good, right?
yeah.
And then suddenly these national e-tailers started to come around without mentioning their names, right?
Yep.
Big logos. They were first $100 million, then they're $500 million. Then suddenly your margins started to disappear and buyers are directly buying, drop shipping everything. And then distribution shows up even more.
Yeah.
And partners are like, oh, what happened to my resale business, right?
Yeah.
And so then everybody's like, oh, you got to get into MSP business, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to me a little bit about the evolution, how this whole segment started. Like how did gold become gold?
So I think you talked a little bit about the magic in what you just said. And I think you also read a little bit of the future of what's going to happen in this industry. So ultimately, at some point in this, now 13 years ago, you didn't have PE firms in here buying up MSPs, and people didn't realize the value of MSPs because it was so splintered. You had a single company that would have 30 different ways of doing business. They'd have one break fix client, then they have a block time, and then they have block time plus break fix, and then but if you go back, the industry had to move because our customers hate break fix, especially once they understand it. So if you ask a customer what's your number one goal, 99% of the time they'll say my number one goal is just to work. So then the transverse to that, what's the number one goal of a break fix company?
Keep it running.
No, for you to break. Because if it doesn't break, guess what? They don't make any money. So the dynamic has to change. And then the industry kind of moved towards this thing of okay, we're gonna do this MSP stuff. We're gonna contract a monthly fee, and then we're gonna add on things that we are gonna call out of scope. Really, all we did was we went to the customer and charged a monthly fee and had still a break fix component. So it was still, how do you make more money? Well, things out of scope. The 20 evolved to where true flat rate, you can't buy labor from us. There is absolutely no break fix component to us. The only way we make more money is for the customer to work really, really good. Perfect goal alignment. And so I think the industry as a whole will move to that. They're in that middle phase right now, and that's MSP. And if you remember, MSPs went to silver, gold, platinum. Then they went all inclusive or all you can eat with a caveat. All inclusive doesn't mean the really, really good stuff on the buffet. If you drop your plate and you have to get another one, in other words, if your server blows up, well, that's not. And so MSP, IT people always wanted these parachutes because they're not business people. They don't understand numbers. They don't understand how to leverage a dollar. I mean, if you charge by the hour, and let's say you charge $200 an hour, what's the most you can make an hour? $200. But what if you charged $1,000 and said, you know what, I'll charge you $1,000 a month, And then the better I make it run, the more I get to leverage. So it's reverse leverage of the money. And let's say you can do all that in 2 hours. You just took your hourly rate to $500, but you have no numbers. You also have to be really, really good. And so I think this evolution is being pushed just out, a lot of it by necessity. The other is it's there's no value in a company if they don't have 3-year contracts and they're not some type of managed service. Break fix. I mean, you broke it broke. You fixed it. Now I don't know if it's going to break again. Why would I pay you a multiple on revenue you've already put in your pocket and spent? Versus, hey, I can forecast a lot of revenue forward. And so I think the industry as a whole just kind of started maturing in there. But it's weird because they really matured on the service side and never matured on the business side. I would argue that most IT companies can make your computer run. They can secure you relatively well. I think they can, and every network's the same. It's got an edge router or firewall. Then you come in from that. It's got switches. It got wired. It hooks everything up. Then you have applications that serve the customer. But most of us are really, really, really good at that. What we're really, really not good at most of the time is the business side. What are your numbers? How do you leverage? How do you leverage your dollar? How do you create value in your company? But in spite of all of that, the outside world looked in and said, you know what? These guys look like SaaS companies because they got this reoccurring revenue. And all of a sudden, we got all this attention from the outside world. And PE firms figured out, and not just PE firms, but big copier companies that bought like Mindshift and All Covered. All of these folks started saying, hey, there's a lot of gold in here. There's a lot of money to be made in this industry. And they stepped into an industry where most of the people were not business savvy. So who's mining all the gold? People on the outside that know how to do it. Very few people on the inside are really mining that gold by themselves. I think the 20 is the only, like, what we would call super large MSPs, 100 million better.
You're almost like a reverse franchise. I mean, you're pulling up organizations that know how to do it. You're just making them so much better because I'm kind of blown away
Yeah.
the simplicity of the value prop and things that are simple are most of the time are very hard to do. And then the magic is in that complexity that to the customer it's simple. But going back to I think the framework that you laid down, maybe we can unpack that a little bit,
Yeah.
marketing, sale, and scale wise. But let's go back to the value proposition, Tim. Talk to me a little bit about the networks that you're managing, kind of networks through this organization that you have built. What does the solution look like in a month-to-month basis? What is that composition? Then we'll come into how you market, how you
Yeah.
like educate, how you build trust to sell and you deliver.
And for the audience, you have to know what a small MSP looks like. A small MSP typically looks like 5 to 10 people. The majority of IT companies are 5 to 10 people. And in there, they're all butcher, baker, candlestick maker. They all kind of do everything. So you might work help desk one day and you're not on the help desk the next day, which means if you're working a ticket the day before, but now you're in the field, somebody calls back in about that ticket, you're not available. So it's the inefficiency is unbelievable in all of these things. My thought process was simply, how do we fix it where a 10-person IT company can deliver what a 500-person IT company can? And what you do is you take all of these people, and it's simple as this for me. If you took 10 MSPs and set them in a room, they all do the same things over and over and over and over and over and over. 10 different times, 10 different ways, no upside from the ways they do it. If you found a secret, something that was incredible, nobody ever knows because it's hid in a small MSP. So my idea was if you had 10 MSPs and they all do the same things, and just take a ticketing and an RMM as an example, the remote monitoring tool, and you step back from it and you say, wow, we set it up 10 times, we manage it 10 times, we pay for it 10 times, we buy minimums 10 times, we pay professional services 10 times. Wouldn't it be a novel idea for these 10 guys to say, let's do this one time and we'll all benefit from it by living in it? And then stretch that out even further. Well, why would 10 MSPs build a 24/7, 365 live answer help desk that's all US based? One, they can't afford it. Two, they don't even remotely have the people to do it. But what if you got 10 MSPs together and said, hey, we should do this? Now, 10 is an easy number. You can't build a big help desk with 10 MSPs. You need a couple hundred. But that was the basic initial premise of being better together. Now, think about what happens. Now, all of a sudden, you create a national footprint without the world knowing it. In other words, now you've got 200 MSPs that all do things the exact same way in different markets, which means I could literally pull labor from at consumption from another MSP who has dead labor on his P&L, and they do things exactly like me. They have same contracts as me. They sell the same. So it's that lead gen, sales, and scale. Everything is done the exact same way. Think about this for a minute. All of a sudden, so you've got all these people doing these things at consumption, moving in the same direction. Then it starts to make sense to, oh, wow, let's just roll all these guys up into one company. I literally built a national footprint in reverse by not buying anything, but just providing the expertise, the knowledge, and all the pieces for all of these players to become 200, 300, 400 man companies where naturally, if you just looked at them and said, how many people you have, they might have 5. But all of a sudden, they have everything that a $100 million MSP has at their fingertips. They got 24/7 help desk. They've got project teams. They start creating their company to where it's field services and project side. Help desk no longer exists that way now because you all live in the same system. Your ticket numbers are the same. You all do things the same. You standardize, which means I am literally training a complete workforce in reverse. In other words, a typical PE firm comes in, buys 3 IT companies. They're gonna pick one standard. They're gonna take the other 2, and what do they have to do? Completely train them, completely move their tool set, completely retool them. We did all of that in reverse. It's crazy, but that's one thing that allowed us to buy 37 companies in 27 months. And all of those companies were completely integrated and completely done in less than 60 days.
That is amazing. Jack Welch used to say success and failure is defined by 10% of net income. And so people think, success is a huge number.
Yeah.
The reality is 10%. And what I'm hearing from you, you're finding 10% here, 10% there, 10% everywhere else. And that's what gives you the scale. So let's go back a little bit to the customer base. Who is the buyer of this service? What's a typical ideal customer profile for MSP 20?
I used to tell salespeople when I hired salespeople, I would have them look out. I was on the 5th floor of a building in Plano that you could look out my window and see all of Dallas. And I'd say, there's your market. Well, that doesn't work. Because it's kind of like sending somebody in that's hungry for a burger, and you throw them in a pit of 1,000 burgers. Which burger do they eat? So they get this crazy thing of so now they're looking for the perfect burger, which if you look for the perfect burger, it could take you 5 years. Perfection kills business. Everybody says, well, I want to be. No, you don't want to be perfect. You want to be really freaking good. Not perfect, because perfect stalls everything out. Because there's always something more perfect that you can do as you learn to do. So if you're always changing things, you never get to a point that you can actually scale or grow or any of the other stuff that goes with it. So, but that's what I used to tell them. Hey, look out there. Ideal customer is typically any customer that has 50 employees all the way up. I think now in the present day that we live, up to 1,000. I think any company that's 1,000 employees or less, or if they have more than 5 locations, should outsource their IT. Why? Because it's cheaper, it's better, you get more experience, all kinds of things. And so when you look out there, does that mean that We might have a customer call and says, "Hey, we have got 30 employees." Do we tell them no? No. I mean, but average customer for us is about $7,500 a month. Now that means my largest customer pays me almost $1 million a month. All the way down to my smallest customer. And people used to tell me, "Well, Tim, why don't you niche? Why don't or niche, however you want to call it, right? But why don't you do that?" And I said, "I am niche." And they go, "What do you mean? It looks like you have a customer in every industry." I said, "Yeah, I'm in the green vertical. If they have green money, I'm going to make their stuff work." Because people don't realize the only difference between a network of 1,000 user company and a 10 user company is only one thing, and it's not complexity. There's only one real difference between those two, and that's the applications that sit on top. Both networks have a firewall. Both networks have wire. Both networks have switches. Both networks have some kind of server infrastructure or something that serves them Active Directory or mail or something like that. It's just a bigger number. And I think once MSPs figure that out, all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, wow." So what you're saying is you can standardize how you think based on the best set of circumstances, and it works for everybody. You think a 10-person company or a 20-person company wants to be less secure than 100. I know financial service companies that do $300-400 million a year, but they're only 20 people.
It resonates a lot. I did a podcast with Joe Levy, CEO of Sophos, and they're very much focused on mid market, where you seem to be. And I was asking Joe, and he said, well, very similar to what you said, is that a virus doesn't differentiate between a small business and a large business, a worm or a ransomware, right?
Yeah.
The challenge is this mid market, where most of not just American business, worldwide business is. They don't have a CISO. They don't know the threats that are evolving with all these AI things that are coming in, right? So they need an organization that can sort of fractionalize a CISO
Yeah.
and look at the topography and understand the topography that you're talking about and really go after that. So let's talk a little bit about how do you typically reach to this audience between 50 to 1,000, sort of the IT organization? Because, as you get into like 500 people, they will have some form of a CIO, right? A VP of IT and etc. So what is your message? How do you reach? How do you get them interested in your offering?
I think a couple things about our offering is if you just look at the offering, but to me, I think you have to have a great offering, but I think it's more important that people know you exist. I mean, I know I know tons of people or tons of companies out there that can probably service as well as we do. I mean, you don't get 3, 4, 5, 600 employees and not make customers happy, right? So, but I think if you step back, I think marketing is the thing that sets us apart from most companies. If you look, most MSPs, I would say 99.9% would be envious of our organic growth rate. Why? Because it's one of the highest in the industry. Why is that? I do not skimp on marketing, and it's not because I'm married to a CMO. It has nothing to do with it. I was this way before, but I had to evolve. In fact, my wife had worked for me 12 years previous. Wasn't my wife then. I wasn't ready because she talked about brand and she talked about all of these things, and I'm like, shit, I just want a customer. What are you talking about brand? Hey, I can't afford to be able to brand. I need customers. And Google did a really good job of bringing me customers at that point. But there's only so much market reach that Google can do. I mean, and we Google produces for me probably, and I did Google all myself. I had to learn it because I couldn't find anybody that knew how to do it in this industry. And so I built the campaigns. I did everything to do with them. I nurtured them. I did all that stuff. And it's funny because when she first came to work with me the first time 12 years ago, I would give nobody access to Google. because it was such an incredible secret for me that just worked. But you have to do more things. You have to have content. You have to be in the market. People have to know you exist. You have to, when you start getting to a certain size, it becomes about brand. You know, all of a sudden, you get to 1,000 seat company, they're not wanting a company that they've never heard of and can't find anything about. It's like, my God, where'd you guys come from? You can't live in that. So I think first thing anybody, if I sit back right now and I thought I'm gonna start a company, I don't care what it is. The first thing that I would perfect for that company in my mind before I started it was, okay, how do I take it to market? How do I get someone to want this product? And that's kind of what we've done. We spent a tremendous amount of money on marketing because it works.
So let's talk a little bit about, now that you're on the other side, um, what is brand to you, Tim?
I think brand is always first impression for anybody. Brand is always first impression, uh, because nobody really knows the inner workings of a company. They might know the name, but brand is kind of that thing that kind of opens the kimono a little bit to culture, the way you think. Uh, Great service companies do great marketing, and if you market great, and if you sell great, and you service great, I mean, brand is pretty easy to build, and then people begin to understand just the culture of the name itself. It's why we named it the 80/20 rule. 20% of people produce 80% of the results, you know, which makes you wonder who wants to work on a company that's an 80 percenter, because you've got to work 5 times harder than a 20 percenter to produce the exact same thing. And so if you can get this mindset of always being great, not perfect, but always being great, and then project that out through your brand, now your brand becomes probably one of the most valuable things that you hold. But a brand is also like a name. I mean, if you burn your name, that name's burnt. It is the hardest thing in the world to recreate trust and all the other stuff if your name gets tarnished. Same with brand.
Really well said. So let's go to the next level, right? So you have an offer that has an intrinsic value. You have a way to reach to propagate that message,
Yeah.
right? Now people are like, hey, I want to know, can you guys do something for me? That's a lead. So walk me through the sales process that you're teaching your
Yeah.
sort of tribe.
This is
What is that method?
this is actually my favorite part because, you know, if I wasn't a visionary, I'd be a salesperson. I mean, I've always kind of been sales minded. So I don't like friction. I don't like a customer that's not happy. I don't like friction. So sales process, if you look at a typical IT company that comes in and sells you, so it starts with a phone call. The 20 MSV, can I help you? Hey, we're looking for an IT support company. We say, oh, great, that's what we do. And you set an appointment. What are 2 things that you 100% know at that moment that both parties know? I know that they have a need, that's IT. They know I'm an IT company. So if I go spend an hour talking about IT, where have I moved them? I haven't. They already knew they were broke. If I go and do an audit and bring them a binder this thick that says your crap is completely screwed up, they already know that, or they wouldn't have called. So to me, it has no value. So I'm a big proponent of uh, not introducing things into the sales process that are unnecessary. Audits are unnecessary. 2 reasons why they're unnecessary. They're basic, fundamental, what they're built for. They're built to scare the customer into thinking they're broke. They're already there. So you're wasting your time. I get more audit tools from potential clients than I could even go through in my lifetime. And they always give it to me. And they're like, they gave us this, but we don't know what it is. And it's like Spanish. to somebody that don't know Spanish. So audits. And here's the other thing. I tell potential clients, why would you ever let somebody walk in and put a thumb drive in your server for 90 minutes? What if your server blew up? Whose fault is it? Second to that is you have no contract. So let's say something's on that thumb drive that you don't want in your environment. You gave them permission to put it there. I mean, so it muddles things up. It's a security risk. And here's the real deal. If you can put a thumb drive in and tell me what you should charge a customer after 90 minutes of this thumb drive just being in a server, you're either a witch or a warlock. You know magic stuff that doesn't exist. And so I tell customers that. So I try not to muddle. But a typical pitch is all about teaching the customer something they don't know. They know IT, they know they want their computers to work, they know all of that. So I tell people that I train in sales, never spend more than 15 minutes on IT, because you're talking to an audience that's ill-equipped to make a decision based on anything you're saying about IT. Outside of, we're really good at it, we can take care of you, blah, 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 blah. So then typically get an hour, you've got 45 minutes. What do you do with that 45 minutes? Well, you help them make a business decision, not an IT one. Because like I say, and I used to tell all potential clients when I was still selling for my company, I'd walk in and I'd first, without fail, I always thank them for their time and promise to give them something of value, because I could never give that hour back to them. That's how valuable this hour is that you're giving me. So to show my appreciation, I'm not going to sit here and sell you. I'm going to educate you to make a really good business decision. And without fail, I would do that. Without fail, I would ask, what's your number one goal? Number one goal, just to work. Okay, so we got to make a good business decision now. Then we break it down. There's 3 types of IT companies that exist, period, on the business side. Let's not argue whether they can service you, because you know what you don't know before? Whether they can service you. Because I've never had an MSP come in before me and say, we're not that good. I've never had one do that. So you have to look at it from a business perspective. What do you lose if you're not great? That's an incredible way of looking at IT. And so we break it down. There's 3 types of IT companies: break, fix. And on the business side, how they charge you. How do they get from point A to point B? Break, fix, MSP, and MID. We all rebranded to MID, which just means managed IT department, because that's what we tell people that we're going to do. We're going to be your IT department. So what does managed service provider mean? And there needed to be a differentiation. So in break fix, I always tell a customer, after I've asked you your number one goal, and then I tell them what break fix is. You break, they come fix you, they send you an invoice. So what's their number one thing they need to happen to make more money? For you to break. If you don't break, they don't make any more money. They're not going to be in business. So if your number one goal is just to work, what is their goal? Just for you to break? You think they're ever going to get you to a place that you don't break? It's anti-business to them. Now, I'm not saying that break fix people are not good, but think about this for a minute. You reward the crappiest break fix companies and you disincentivize the really good ones. Why is that? Well, because you pay for bad behavior. Bad behavior means if they are slow and take a lot more time, how do you reward them? More money. There is not a single good behavior that you pay for in a break fix company. No smart business guy would ever say yes to that. So now we've educated on break fix. Now we go to MID, break that down. And if there's an hourly component in anything they do, they're break fix. Think about this for a minute. I just had a guy that was in, and so they were asking all these questions, and he says to me, he goes, well, Tim, I mean, we're not break fix. I said, well, how do you do projects? He goes, we estimate the hours. I said, so can I ask you a serious question? How do you estimate the hours? Well, we overestimate because we're not 100% sure. I said, do you ever refund back if you estimate it takes 20 hours and it takes 10, do you adjust it? Well, no, it's an estimate. We bid it. Oh, so you double bill the customer. The business side of IT has been broken for a long time. So the 20s real claim to fame is we took all the friction out of the relationship and we aligned our goals. So a goal of an MSP is to do things out of scope if they want to make more money. It's the only way they can make more money, right? Server fails on the weekend. Are you going to tell them no? My company never take advantage of somebody at their time of need. Why? Because we're not going to come and say, hey, you have to pay us 30 hours of labor this weekend. Or it's not how it's built. We ask for a single box of money. And we ask you as a consumer, the better we make your stuff run, let me keep more of what's in this box. If we don't do a great job, we get to keep less of what's in this box. Now think about that dynamic. So what's my number one goal? For them to never break. And what am I going to do? My whole business model is built around this premise or this idea of never breaking. Never breaking can be a lot of things. Never breaking could be you don't get breached. You do all the things that necessary to minimize all risk.
And I can see the math already, because if you're saying, you start at 50-person company, and I'm not drawing 1-1, but if they're paying, 7 to 8 grand a month, it's less than one headcount cost per year.
It's a
And they're getting a fully resourced, fully capable organization that is there 24/7. And so let's go to the other side, the last step, right? As an organization, so when you're taking this like 5-10% shops, how do you sort of make them unlearn what made them a business to run and get them to move them over to your template? Because these are people, right? These are not software upgrades.
Yeah.
What is that cultural upgrade that they're doing that in 60 days they're coming in and becoming MSP 20?
So the first thing they have to do is change their tool set. Big change for you talk about IT people. The holy grail to IT people is a tool set. I mean, they'll gripe about tools that I mean, it's crazy. Most MSPs spend 99% of their time dealing with their tool sets that has a less than 1% degree change in their business as a whole. Versus a guy that spends 1% of his time on tool sets because he creates it and it's done. So the first thing they have to do is they have to come to this place. They say, okay, you know what? We get it. We get it. We get it. If I was to use ditch digging as just an example, and you're digging with a shovel, and I ask you to dig with a trencher, yeah, but I can really do a good job with a shovel. Yeah, but you can't make any money, and I can do just as good a job with a trencher. So the first thing is to get beyond this. This tool's better than this, or all that. A really good tool stack, and they have to standardize on our tool stack. That is the first thing. Now, here's the wild thing. I tell people, I'll show you this right quick. I tell people there's only one thing, and this is a tool. I don't have a patent on this, so you could use this if you wanted to. Anybody can steal this. Anybody can use it. But there's a tool out there that will 100% accuracy tell you what's wrong with your company. It's nuts. It is absolutely nuts that there's a tool out there that will tell you with 100% accuracy what's wrong with your company. And I give this away at a lot of conferences I go to. It's this little, you see this little thing right here? It says the 20, the only tool you'll ever need, but it's not talking about the 20. It's a compact. You open it up and it's a mirror. You want to know what's wrong with your company? If you're the owner, you are. It's exactly what you imagine and decide to do with it every day. So if you're struggling to hit the $5 million mark and you're bouncing along and you can't do, you're the problem. You have to change. Change is the hardest thing for people to do, but change is the only thing that brings about change. Otherwise, and so, and I ask people a lot of times, I read a Harvard Business Review, and it basically asked this question: do you want to be rich or do you want to be a king? Every owner has to look in that little mirror and say, I want to be rich. Because being a king is way too expensive. The king side is ego. Ego says, I'm not changing because I know everything. That's why I'm a big proponent of walking in the footsteps of someone that has gone where you want to go versus walking in the footsteps of someone that tells you how to get there but's never been there.
So do you think, Tim, this dimension in your mind come from your time in service?
No, I think this comes from being a kid, a middle kid in a family of 8 kids.
Can you tell me a little bit more? Like, because I would love to kind of get into leadership now, because, to get an army of 5 or 10, you're taking a tribe and you're making them on your own tribe, and they have to unlearn a lot of things, and while they cannot forget, their trade. So walk me through that journey, that transformation, because it is not about the tool, it is not about, methods, it's about trust in you and following you. And so it is about leadership. So how do you do that, one after another after another?
I think it's a couple things. I think trust is foundation. If people don't trust you, and that's one thing. As a kid, I grew up, and my dad and mother drilled it into us that there is nothing worse than a liar. And then they would drill into us every bad behavior that ever happens. You have to be a liar first. If you rob somebody, you have to lie and say it's okay. You have to lie to yourself. And the bad thing about being a liar is it's always to yourself first, because you have to convince yourself of a different reality. And so I've spent my life trying to be real and who I am, with no apologies, with no lies. I know my weaknesses, I know my strengths. Once you have trust, then you have to have a dream that other people want to be a part of. And that dream has to be a dream not only of friendship, mentorship, leadership, but it has to be one that creates a desired outcome. And I think a desired outcome for a lot of people is to be in a place that they can own every minute of every day for the rest of their lives at some point. Because then you break the modern day slavery. Modern day slavery is to the dollar. So as long as you work for a dollar, you're essentially in slavery. And if you break that, then not only do you create the slavery humanity piece, but you also break the curse that happened in the garden. If you know anything about Bible, it says that man will work by the sweat of his brows the rest of his life to feed his family, blah, 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 right? All of a sudden you can break two curses that happen. And so I think the dream has to have some real to it. And then not everybody wants the same dream. So you have to be out there and you have to lay it out, and the right people will grasp onto the dream and take hold, and the wrong people won't. Then you have to produce. I mean, you can't create a dream and it never be a reality. Really cool example for me is I ask people a lot of times, what does Nike sell? What does Nike sell? And of course, they always answer me back, well, tennis shoes, t-shirts, all this stuff. And I said, no. There is no money in tennis shoes and t-shirts. Nike sells dreams. If you put these shoes on, you're going to jump like Mike. You're going to slam the ball like Mike. You're going to play basketball like. I'm talking about Michael Jordan. No, people will pay massive amounts of money for a dream, but they won't pay you anything for a shoe. Great example of this. I was in Walmart one time with my son, and he needed some new tennis shoes. And we found him some nice, regular, everyday Nikes or whatever it was, and they were white. And he goes, Dad, I want black Nikes. And I said, no, you got a black pair of shoes and you've never worn them. And he goes, I'm getting the black Nikes, Dad, and that's just the way it is. I said, no problem. So I went and bought a $9 in Walmart, same aisle, a white pair of $9.95 sneakers. Bought them, took them home. My son didn't get the black ones, and my son's like, I'm not wearing those. And I said, you will not get a pair of shoes from me or your mother until these are worn out. He wore the shit out of those shoes. But he learned a lesson. A tennis shoe is just a tennis shoe. Why did he want the black ones? Because a friend of his had it. It was a dream. Dreams are always more valuable in human beings, because dreams are what create hope and everything else that goes with it. And so I wanted to, you look at the 20, I wanted to take an industry that most struggle to build a business in, and I wanted to give them a different path. And that path would lead them to a really cool dream.
So, Tim, let's talk about the dream. We're coming to an end.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about Tim's dream of how big this is, how big this could be, and what is in it for all those who participate.
So I'm a big proponent of Better Together. I was just at a conference and there was about 50 MSPs in the room, and I said, dream with me for a minute. I said, in this room, let's say that you all average $1 million. And by show of hand, how many people are in here are $1 million or more? And hands went up. I said, so we can average $1 million in this room. Let's say that you averaged 20%, which would mean all of you would have to be perfect because that's best in class. But that's $200,000. And let's say that you're all worth a 5x multiple. That's $1 million a piece. So each one of you collectively is worth $1 million. Individually, you're worth $1 million. Collectively, you're worth $50 million if everything stayed the same in this room. I said, with the stroke of a pen, I could create 100 million in this room, and nothing has to change except your ego. Who wants to share the 100 million with me? And that's really, and this is what's cool in life, when you can actually move people from where they are to a better place, and it pays you to do it. I mean, I would never lie to anybody and say, Tim's just doing it because he loves people. I do love people, but I'm in this to make a lot of money. Fortunately, I'm in an industry that is incredible. The only difference is I can take them there because I'm willing to share, which most people aren't. Most people are greedy, and nobody has to be greedy on this. If you look at the first 6 companies that I rolled up 27 months ago, they took 60% cash at the table and they left 40% in. Their 40% is now more valuable than their whole was in the beginning. And if you froze them in time, they're sitting on a 20x multiple, or very close to it. That's how you do it in this industry. Because the only difference in valuation is separate or together. That's as simple as it gets. Separate, together. Together, we're worth a whole lot more. A lot of people will not get it. And a lot of people will end up bouncing along. They'll sell because they think they'll be happy with $1 million. Where I'm hoping the 50 MSPs I'm talking to in the room would be more happy if they had 2 million. And the only thing they have to change is their ego.
That is amazing. So, Tim, we're coming to an end, but I feel like we can do at least 6 episodes on the theme that you created.
Yeah.
I'd love to come back. I'd love to have you back.
Yeah.
What an amazing journey. And we'll check in sometimes this year again. Thank you.
I really appreciate you having me. I love doing this. I mean, and it's live. It's this is who I am. I don't use notes. This is as real as it gets for people.
And you're making a difference. That's what it matters. Making a difference.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Thanks.
Awesome.